Hello, greetings from a very snowy Glenver, Virginia. We are out of school today, which is great because it has afforded me the opportunity to get to speak with you guys here right before your opening night, which I'm sure you're excited about. I'm excited for you. My name is Steve Franco. Everyone just calls me Franco. I am the playwright for In-Laws, Outlaws, and Other People That Should Be Shot. We had hoped to do a Zoom call in which I would have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the play and where you guys would have the opportunity to ask me some questions. And that really just never came to fruition with some scheduling conflicts. And we've had a tremendous amount of winter weather this year in our part of Virginia, which has disrupted things quite a bit. So here we are. I thought that I would just take a few minutes, tell you guys a little bit about the show, and try to answer some of the questions that are typically asked of me. Certainly, if there are other questions that you have that you would like answered, you've got my email address. Please feel free to email me. I also have an Instagram page. It's just my last name, franco.theater. Or you can look me up on Facebook. I know that's an old person thing, but you can look me up on Facebook as well. I have a playwright page on Facebook. Any of those ways you can contact me. I would be more than happy to answer any of your questions I don't cover here. Usually, the first question that is asked of me is the title. What's the origin of this show? How did it come about? And honestly, it goes back about 100 years to when I was in college. And during that time, I took a playwriting course, and in the class, the professor asked us what we thought about the titles of a variety of different shows. And she gave us a list of about 25 different shows, and we had to choose 3 or 4 that sounded interesting to us. Well, basically, they sound interesting because there's something about a title that draws audiences in. And when the class concluded for the day, the professor sent us home with a challenge. And the challenge was this: I want each of you to go home and come up with at least one play title that you think would catch an audience's eye and make them want to come and see your show. And that's how I came up with In-Laws, Outlaws, and Other People That Should Be Shot. Obviously, we know a criminal element needs to be dealt with, but when we think about our in-laws, yeah, some of them can be pretty challenging to us. And then the real challenge is, who are these other people? So for me as an audience member, not only is there this tongue-in-cheek comedy inferred by the title itself, because we're not literally wanting to shoot anyone, but there's also this idea that there's some mystery around it. Ooh, I want to go and see that because I want to find out who the other people are. I know my in-laws that drive me crazy. Of course, there are criminals to look for, but who are the other people? And so that's where the title came about. In setting the show, there were a lot of challenges because originally my idea for this was a family reunion in which the family is there, and some of the family members know that certain family members that show up are involved in illegal activities, and other family members don't. And so the comedy there was in that one half of the family was attempting to keep a secret, and the other half of the family was asking questions and speaking out of their ignorance. And it just really wasn't a storyline that carried itself very far. So I literally took that play and put it on the shelf for nearly 20 years. So then we fast forward to 2012 when this show was written. It was the week of auditions for our fall play. And myself, just like your director, like every director all across the world, we spend hours reading other people's scripts and trying to find just the perfect story, the perfect fit for your community, something that works technically, that you have the ability to stage, something that you have the correct ensemble of actors, or at least potential ensemble of actors who will audition for the show. All these different elements go into making this story work. And I hadn't come up with anything. I literally had read close to 40 scripts, wasn't happy with any of them. A few would have worked. They were good shows, but they weren't really the kind of thing that I was super enthusiastic about casting. I was put on the spot in one of my classes by one of my actors. He raised his hand. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Franco, I got a question for you. We got auditions coming up on Thursday. What's the title of the show?" Without even thinking, it shot out of my mouth. I said, "Oh, we're doing this comedy called In-Laws, Outlaws, and Other People That Should Be Shot." And as soon as I said the title, the class kind of erupted in laughter, and they thought that was funny, and it was very reaffirming for me as a playwright to go, okay, so I passed the title test. Yay. But the other problem with that is I had no play. No play. I hadn't written word one that was usable for this group. So I went home immediately that night in a complete panic and spent about 3 hours hacking out the opening scene. And that is the scene that we used on audition night. And then I hid behind what we call white lies, which incidentally are still lies. And I told the cast after auditions, and I chose folks that were going to be in the play just based upon how they read. And I literally created characters for each one of the 16 actors that I chose to be in the show. I only had Dad, Beth, and Mrs. Draper in that opening scene. And that was it. And I had really no idea where the story was going to go, what it was going to be about. And for 18 straight nights, I would go to rehearsal, come home, hang out with my wife and my family for a while, then everyone would go to bed, and I would stay up from 11 to about 2 in the morning, around 3 hours of writing every night for 18 straight nights until I came up with the show that you guys are staging today. I simply told my cast, we're not going to read the entire play. We're going to do this a scene at a time because I really want you to focus on characterization. Those of you that don't have a part yet, you do have a part. We're going to get around to you. Hang in there. And for some reason, they bought into that way of doing things, and no one ever really questioned much other than, "Mr. Franklin, when are we going to get our script? Oh, I can't wait to do my part. When are we going to get our script?" And then after 18 days, everyone had it, and we literally spent the next 5.5 weeks rehearsing before performance. So that's kind of the origin of the show. Something else that I'm asked about frequently are the characters. Are these people real? Are they really in your family? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, in that all of them are based upon people that are in my family. And some of them very loosely based, and some of them almost spot on. But when you're a playwright and you're from a big family, you have to be really careful how spot on you are, because some people might be offended by how you portray them. So I do have an Aunt Rose, and Aunt Rose is a very, very fun, wonderful lady, very in charge and in command and very opinionated. And so that character is very close to real. My father's side of the family, the Franco family line, my dad is one of 13 children. So going to family reunions as a child where I had an additional 12 uncles and 12 aunts, and every one of them had anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 children. These were enormous affairs, lots of people, and lots of opportunity there for me to gather material, and I didn't even realize I was gathering material. But I do have an Aunt Rose. I do not have an Uncle Leo, but the other side of my family, the last name are the Leos, the Leo side of the family. So I worked that in by taking the last name from one side and making it a first name. I do have an Uncle Bud, and Uncle Bud is very much fun to be around. Just a great guy, a lot of fun to be around because he is very opinionated and he's a little rough around the edges. I do not have an Aunt Bunny, but I was looking for phonetics there. I wanted that B and B to go together. Uncle Bud's wife's name is Louise, and Louise really didn't, Bud and Louise didn't flow very easily, or as Shakespeare would put it, trippingly off the tongue. So in that case, I simply created a name that worked. All of these characters are, in their own way, real people. And that's what makes your challenge so great as an actor, is you're playing farce, which farce is exaggerated reality, if there's even any reality in it at all. And in some cases, there's not a whole lot of reality involved in farce. We're simply along for a fun ride, and we accept that reality doesn't always enter into it. But in this case, because we're talking about a family in a somewhat farcical situation, the situation has to carry the farce more so than the family. These people have to in some way be real enough or believable enough that your audience actually buys into them. Otherwise, if you stand up and you simply present them as characterizations rather than true characters, then it's much more difficult for your audience to see their own family in you as characters. I'm asked a lot of times, ironically enough, about the ham, and so when I read the little tag description on the poster for your play, I laughed out loud at the fact that ham was even included in that. I have had literally 100 or more people send me email messages wanting to know where they can find Schnellendals in New York, that they're going on a trip to New York and they want to go to Schnellendals and they want to buy a ham there. And I sadly have to inform them that there is no such place as Schnellendals. All of the great delicatessens in New York in its classic area, this 1930s to 1950s time period in which Uncle Leo would have lived there. All of those great delicatessens were basically based around names that were very, very ethnic. And so I needed an ethnic sounding name that would work really well for the delicatessen. And I have a great friend who lives in New York, who's a tour guide, and his last name is Schneller. And I knew, basing the show in New York, that my friend Eddie would want to read this. And so, as a little tip of the hat to Eddie, I took his last name, Schneller, made it a little more ethnic sounding, and came up with Schnellendals. We have Schnellendals Delicatessen. They have the most wonderful ham in the world. It's a great place to go and eat. You should try it. So I worked this sort of made-up place into the show, and voila, here we are with people requesting ham from a place that doesn't exist. And incidentally, on the opening night of the show, I was in the projection room with all of my techies. As a playwright, you always worry that something that's funny to you is not going to be funny to anyone else, and you're going to be playing to crickets. And as Act One was about to conclude, we'd had a great opening night. The audience was laughing at nearly everything we thought they would laugh at, and another 100 things we didn't think they would laugh at. And so I was super excited. The act was getting ready to end. I sprint from our projection room down the stairs, down the hallway to the backstage area and into the dressing room so I can congratulate the actors. Hey, you guys are killing it. This is awesome. And no one's in there. It's completely empty. So I go and I knock on the ladies' dressing room door. No answer. No one's in there. I go in the back hallway. I'm looking around. I see actors nowhere. And so finally I go back, where in the world are they? I go on stage, people around, and I hear this clinking backstage. I'm like, what in the world's going on? I come in and I stick my head onto the set, and there's the entire cast. The ham that we made for the show that opening night was so good, and none of the actors had a chance to eat as much as they wanted in pre-show. They weren't even going back to the dressing room for intermission. They're all just sitting there eating ham. So the Schnellendals ham is both legendary in the fact that we made it up, and also in that first cast really thinks that it exists. All right, guys, I hope that you have a great day. Take care now.